May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord. For the most part, I loathe commercials. In fact, I don't know anybody who likes commercials. Even a friend of mine who films them and directs them says, I really don't like the commercials that we make. They're so intrusive. You know, we just get into a television program that we're enjoying. We're coming up to a point where we know there's going to be a switch in the plot of some sort, and all of a sudden we have to break for a commercial. And not just one, but maybe 10 or 12 before we get back to the program. I remember one, I haven't seen it in a while, but there was this young fellow who I thought was just obnoxious. You wanted to go up to him and smack him around a little bit and say, wake up, what's the matter with you? Gwen and I wondered if he in fact was wearing a wig, or even if the thing might have been computer generated. We didn't know. But nevertheless, the program or the commercial did not entice me at all to want to buy that product. I get a big kick out of watching drug commercials. They tell you how this drug is so wonderful, it's going to cure whatever your ill is, but then they have all of these things that they lay out for you that are side effects. And they go through them quickly, but nevertheless you say, do I want that? And at the end they might even say, and beware because it could cause death. Before the commercial is finished, they'll also say, when you ask your doctor about this, just tell your doctor you've got a heart problem. And I ask myself, why do I need to tell my doctor I have a heart problem? He should be telling me I have a heart problem. If he doesn't know, I need another doctor. There seem to be hundreds of car commercials telling us all kinds of things about the cars and giving us all kinds of approaches. Some of them show us the beauty of the car. Some of them will show us the awards that their particular cars have won. Others will talk about all of the advantages of it, how it prevents you from hitting something in the front, hitting something backing up, how it does this and does that. And still another one will have it pouring outside, and you can be safe and comfortable in the vehicle of the car listening to a wonderful radio. There are some commercials too that I wonder about. There's a commercial where a young woman goes and seems to give some money to a woman begging. And when she gets up, there's a man who says, you know, you shouldn't do that. It only encourages them. And she stops for a minute, as if to say, all right, I'll show you. And she goes back to the young woman who's begging and gives her a watch. And then she goes, hops on her motorcycle, and off she goes. And I said to Gwen, what are they encouraging us to buy? What are they talking about? What's the point of that commercial? And then, of course, once in a while there is a really good commercial. And it's a commercial you want to see again and again because it's well done and has a good point to it. But nevertheless, you know, 8 minutes out of a half an hour going to be devoted to commercials. Some of them may be 5 seconds long, 10 seconds, what have you, but it's going to be one after another. And even though millions of dollars are spent on this, I remember a course I took some years ago where they talked about commercials. They don't know how effective commercials are. They just assume it is. And perhaps the best they can hope for is that when you are in need of a particular product, maybe in the back of your mind, something will register. And you say, hey, I remember something. Let's go look at that. Well, why do I mention this? Because that's what's going on in our gospel today. Jesus is sending out his disciples, not just the 12. There's a large group. He's sending out 70, 2 by 2, into the various villages that he wants to come to before he gets to Jerusalem. These disciples that he's sending out, you see, are the commercials of his day. There wasn't any radio or TV or newspapers. If you wanted somebody to know about something, you would send a messenger. And so they are bringing the message. They are bringing the commercial, you see. Jesus is coming. The Lord is near. The kingdom of heaven has come to you. And they demonstrate this by healing the sick and by casting out demons. Some people respond. Some people are turned off. Some towns don't want them, and they go to the edge of town and wipe the dust of the town off their feet. Nevertheless, it's still the best way to bring a message. Mass media does one thing, but the personal touch does something entirely different and better. They come back and they tell Jesus that they've had some great success. We were able to cast out demons and heal the sick. And he says, don't be so happy about that. That's a power that he gave them, you see. But rejoice in the fact that your names are written in heaven. Rejoice in the fact that you are part of God's kingdom. Today, we are the disciples that are sent out. And our job is the same, and it's different from the original disciples. We're not called to go in the corner and hold a sign and say, the Lord is coming. But we are called to talk about our faith where it seems to be appropriate. Last Sunday, we sang the hymn that you all know, I love to tell the story. It will be my theme and glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. We like that song, we like that hymn, we sing it, but as Lutherans, we don't always know how to tell that story. Some other denominations do it better than we do. Garrison Keillor, if you've heard that name, speaks of Lutherans as God's frozen people. We have faith, we have a deep faith, but sometimes it's hard to talk about it because we have so much internalized. But nevertheless, to be able to tell someone else about God's love in your life is very, very meaningful. They want to hear that. And whether people who are believers or whether they are not, they want to hear it. Last week, before we started, I was talking with Elaine and I said, can you imagine how fast the time has gone? A year has passed since you kindly celebrated my 50th anniversary here. And we talked about that a little bit, and then she said, did you ever think about doing something else? And I said, sure. And I told her a story, and I hope you don't mind I repeat it for a minute. Probably about 40 years ago, you know, I said, well, I wonder how long I should stay here in St. John's. Colleagues that I graduated with, many of them had moved to other churches. And there's no formula. You don't know when to stay, when to go. But anyway, the bishop from Texas was visiting our synod, and I asked our bishop, could I talk to him? And so I had lunch with the bishop from Texas. And we hit it off, and he said, you know, I could give you an associateship with my brother-in-law, and you know, you could come to Texas. And it sounded fascinating. And I said, well, can I think about it for just a little bit? He said, sure, give me a call. Well, I went home, and that very night, I received a call from a former member of St. John's who had moved to Florida. And we had kept in touch, and he called me and he said, you know, we lost our pastor, he moved on. Would you be interested in coming down to Florida? And I said, I'd love to talk to you about it. And so he said, all right, I'll make arrangements to have you flown down here. So the next day then, I called the Texas bishop back and I said, you know, I got this call and I'd sooner investigate the Florida situation at this point. And in the church, you see, we can't go after 2 or more calls at the same time. It's 1, 1, 1, 1. And so, you know, that was finished. I went down to Florida for a couple of days, met the council, met other people, saw the church, saw the community, and they said, we'll let you know. And I got a call a couple of days later, and someone told me, well, we've narrowed it down to you and to one other pastor who's on the west coast of Florida. We'll let you know. So I said, fine. So about a month later, I get a call no, it wasn't quite that long ago. But anyway, I got another call saying they chose the other pastor. And I said, okay, fine. And perhaps a month or so after that, my friend calls me. And I said, how are you doing? How's the new pastor? And he said, well, I'll tell you something. The night before he was going to preach his trial sermon at the church, he calls us and he says, I've changed my mind. I've decided to stay where I am. And it hit me. I was dumbfounded. Because, you know, the door to the Texas situation closed, and now in a very strange way, the door to Florida changed. And I sat back, and I finally realized that, you know, the Lord and His guidance and His love wanted me to stay right here. And I've been completely happy doing that. It's been a great blessing. And ever since, I've learned that when doors shut, to stand back, Don't try to push that door open. Don't try to go through the window and try and finagle away into what you want. But I sit back and I say, okay, Lord, what do we do? What do I do? Or if it has to do with the congregation, what do we do? Where do we turn now? Always, you see, looking for how the Lord, the living Lord, is in my life, in our lives. And to be able to talk a little bit about that. I'm sure you can do the same thing. But look at your life. Look at the various things that are happening in it. See where the Lord is moving you or guiding you. Where His love shows up. We love to tell the story. We've got to find the words to do it. Because the love of the Lord is with us. This is the message of the gospel. Now, to be able to share it is one of the most wonderful things we can do, because this, you see, is the foundation of our lives. It's what everything else is built on. And we must, whenever we see the possibility, to share it with someone else. Amen. The peace of God, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Our next hymn is 663.